Aloha! Thank you for tuning in to episode number 44. My name is Christina Estrada, partner of Booyah Marketing, where we have deeper connections. Today, our returning honored guest is Suzanne Kellner-Zinck, with 30 plus years of experience working in mental health, specializing in holistic healing through hypnosis, helping clients quickly address the root causes of emotional illness when traditional mental health approaches have failed. Public speaker, author, podcaster, a mover and a shaker, setting souls free to live their purpose on purpose. How are you, Suzanne?
Very well, thank you. It's very lovely to be back with you again, Christina.
Yay, thank you. So, where did hypnotism come from?
Well, it actually goes back many thousands of years. When we think about in Africa, the drum circles, the dancing, these kinds of things, very, very hypnotic because drumming circles really do put people into a hypnotic trance state. And even when we think about meditation,
Mhm.
meditation is actually the same state that a person will go into for the hypnotic state, meaning the brain waves are slowed down to the same degree, be it from beta to alpha or even down to theta. So it's really something that goes back many, many thousands of years to ancient Greece and India, quite frankly. But when we think about modern hypnotism, we go to this man called Mesmer. Franz Mesmer. This is where the term mesmerism comes from. He lived from 1734 to 1815, and he used this term to describe an altered state of consciousness characterized by narrow, focused attention and increased responsiveness to suggestion. He had this concept called animal magnetism, which resulted in seizure-like experience and frequently unconsciousness. And when the consciousness returned, the patients reported that their symptoms were gone. It was sort of the beginning of group therapy, if you will. So it was pretty cool, actually, in a lot of ways. But Benjamin Franklin, of all people, went over there to help disprove him in his work, even though the patients were healed by the work he did, even though they didn't really understand how it worked. Then Marquis de, I can't pronounce the name of this guy, Portugal and his brother, the Count Chastanet, independently arrived to the conclusion that it was the intention or will of the mesmerist and not the magnetic fluid, as Mesmer believed, that created the cures and changes in patients. They found that the subject would fall peacefully asleep, calling the state artificial somnambulism, and they published some books in 1784, 1785 to talk about the phenomena of post-hypnotic suggestion, which really is a suggestion that still is effective after leaving trance. Very useful. They use it a lot for stage shows and stuff, but it's also useful for helping people heal issues. Then there's the next guy was from 1756 to 1719, Jose Custodio. He was known about why some subjects responded to the animal magnetism better than others. He eliminated the concept of universal magnetic fluid and found that about 20% of his subjects would go into sleep-like trance simply by closing their eyes and focusing on his voice as he commanded them to sleep. Now, many of you may understand, if you've ever been hypnotized or studied hypnotism, they always, well, usually tell the person at some point, they'll snap their fingers and they'll go, sleep, just like that. And that's where this came from. He referred to the state as lucid sleep and found that individuals of any age could be induced into this state. He realized that the power of mesmerism was based on the abilities and susceptibilities of the subject, meaning the person being hypnotized. He focused on the suggestion rather than the will of the mesmerist, meaning the person who's doing the hypnosis, attacking both Mesmer's theories in magnetism and Purser's theory of artificial somnambulism. Now, we have the British physicians and the birth of hypnosis when things get really exciting. John Ellison was a physician. He was first to use the French invented stethoscope, seen as useless by his British peers because they're idiots. So if you think Brits are smart, now we know they're not. Friendly with Thomas Wakely. He was the owner and publisher of the Lancet. Lancet is a very important peer-reviewed journal out of Great Britain for medical stuff. He had many of his lectures and case studies published in the Lancet well before he turned his attention to mesmerism. He founded and taught at the teaching hospital at the University of London and published a classic book called Human Physiology in 1820. Charles Dickens, the author, became an avid mesmerist working with Ellison, interestingly enough. The Lancet did not support Wakely's use of mesmerism, so he was no longer published there and had to give up his teaching at the medical school, but he ended up practicing medicine and doing mesmerism out of his home anyway. Man of my own thinking, just do what you got to do. James Braid, 1795 to 1860, and James Esdell, 1808 to 1859, began practicing mesmerism with the Lancet and other medical journals unwilling to publish their findings. Ellison started his own journal in 1843 called the Zaus and published studies on animal magnetism. It was published as a platform for these British physicians to reach the world. See, there are ways to reach the world even in those days. The Journal of Clinical and Experimental Hypnosis first appeared in January 1953, still thriving today as the International Journal of Clinical and Experimental Hypnosis, owned by the Society of Clinical and Experimental Hypnosis and published by Taylor and Francis. Taylor and Francis is a very well-known publisher of all kinds of academic journals, usually in the medical field. It's also the official journal of the International Society of Hypnosis and the Society of Psychological Hypnosis, APA's Division 30. American Psychiatric Association, that is. The second major hypnosis journal, the American Journal of Clinical Hypnosis, was first published in 1958 and continues as the official journal of the American Society of Clinical Hypnosis. Now, James Braid. He started his experiments working with friends and employees, perfecting his induction and trance state using eye fixation, staring at a candle flame placed high enough to cause the eyes to roll up, replicating the condition of LaFontaine's subject with a number of his volunteers. So sometimes when I do inductions with people online, I'll tell them just to look up until their eyes start blinking and then close. So that's an induction we still use to this day. It's very easy.
And what does that do when someone?
Well, by the time they have their eyes rolled up, they're blinking, and you tell them to close their eyes, that's the beginning of the trance state. And then we have to add deepeners to it. So I'll tell people to imagine their staircase floating in the sky. Very, very hypnotic to have it floating in the sky because we don't generally see staircases floating in the sky. And I also have them make them spiral in shape because those two are supposedly very hypnotic. So I just try to use hypnotic things that people have to use their real imagination to create, because hypnosis is all about using one's imagination. And the visual people do a lot better a lot of times, but sometimes they can hear stuff and go through it that way as well.
Really?
We have to, a really good hypnotist will use inductions that match the way their clients learn unconsciously, which is an argument I had with one of our professors in my instructional design technology courses, who said, the peer-reviewed literature says that doesn't it doesn't exist. And I said, then why does it work with my clients that I work with every day? You can't always test everything in a clinical setting, in an experiment in some lab someplace. You have to learn by doing it with people in real life. And as far as I'm concerned, that is the only thing that matters. Are you getting results? How are you getting those results? Continue doing what gets results. So she backed down. Obviously, I had practical experience and she did not. So as I was going, he was the first one. Braid was actually the first one to adopt the term hypnosis from the Greek hypnos, which means sleep, in hypnotism in 1842. He regretted using the term confusing hypnosis with actual sleep, trying to change the term to neurophonology. He translated that to mean science of nervous sleep, but hypnosis and hypnotism had already caught on with the public, going back to hypnosis and hypnotism for the state, which moved us beyond the idea of magnetic fluid and allowed serious investigators to study the phenomena for a time. James Esdell, he was masterful. He was a master of painless surgery. Not coming from a wealthy family, he had to take a 20-year contract with the East India Company operating in India, a British possession in 1830 when he graduated medical school. It required for all of its new physicians He observed local Hindu doctors placing their patients and others into traditional Hanoi hypnosis. It was the first attempt to replicate the painless surgery that he had read about in Ellison's publication. He successfully hypnotized a patient who completed surgery without any signs of pain. This is just prior to when anesthesia became available. Up to this point, surgery was completed without attempts at pain control. Can you imagine going through surgery without any pain control?
Wow. They used hypnotism instead of, well, they didn't have anything. So,
Well, they learned how to use the hypnotism for pain control. In fact, he was a surgeon who worked for the Indian, in India for the British government, actually, and he was using hypnosis for amputations of the soldiers who were harmed. And it was successful. It was like 95% successful. And then he goes back and
wow.
he tells the British government what he's doing. They tell him to stop, and he's like, fuck you. So he continued doing what he knew how to do. Man of my own mind. I still had hope that his discovery would change the world, as written in the classic book Mesmerism in 1847, which I have read. It's a pretty interesting book. You can get it on Amazon. Mesmerism in India. Estill hated India, leaving as soon as his 20-year term of service ended, but he was in poor health and died at the age of 51. His book has remained classic in the medical application of hypnosis and also documents non-surgical cures that would support psychological application of hypnosis as well, which is what my specialization is, helping people with psychiatric psychological problems. The brief heyday of the British hypnosis supported by Ellison, Braid, and Estelle did not last long, but it offered a huge advances in theory and practice that would be passed back to France, where hypnosis would find a more favorable reception, which was at the Nancy School. Well, Ambrose Leblanc, 1823 to 1904, influenced by Abbe Ferrara and James Braid when he first tried to include hypnosis in his practice. He was warned off it because it could scare patients away, believing it was witchcraft. Unfortunately, the movies have turned off too many people from it because they don't understand it. You're in and out of it every damn day. Get used to the idea. You just don't know what it is, so you don't know.
So how do you
Anyway,
know if you are?
well, that's the thing, if you're watching advertisements over and over again and you're buying stuff that you don't need or want, and you don't know why, well, they use that consistent telling you
That's
over
what
and
it
over
is.
again your body stuff is a form of hypnosis. I mean, when you're 7 years old, this is how you learn things. You learn their multiplication tables this way. You learn your chemistry tables this way, right? Seriously. Every time you watch preachers, the really good preachers, the black guys, who are very emotive and they get the emotions up and running, and they know how to, what we call mark out words, which is emphasizing certain words and changing their tonality. They're very hypnotic, and that's how they're able to build these really big, huge churches and get a lot of money from people and basically steal it from them. This is what's happening, people. This is reality. Can't trust all of your preacher people. And then, although I will note, it's mainly the white, huge churches that have done that, not the black. The black people seem to be doing fine. In any case, in terms of ethics, as far as I can tell. You want to just make that correct. But and then we have people like Hitler, I mean, Jim Jones, they were able to mesmerize people to do horrific things.
Oh yeah.
Jim Jones, he had whole families basically drink Kool-Aid that was poisoned to kill themselves to go to heaven or wherever the hell they were supposed to go. Unbelievable. So we need to know what hypnosis is so we can protect ourselves from being hypnotized by people who have really bad ideas for us. And that's why I'm really glad I learned it, because no one's going to ever hypnotize me, i.e. brainwash me about anything ever again,
That's
including my
powerful.
professors who don't know anything about anything. I just fight them back with, you can find research to back up anything, basically. That's the reality. Anyway, moving on. So we were talking about Libalt. He moved from Strasbourg to live in the city of Nancy in France and opened a new practice. He believed suggestion was the key to hypnosis and explored how the mind, in Greek psyche, could act upon the body, soma. Libalt could be considered the first mind-body practitioner understanding psychosomatic disorders for what they were. Hippolyte Burnham, 1837 to 1919. He also received his medical degree in Strasbourg and opened a practice in Nancy, France, where he eventually became a professor of internal medicine. He had no training in hypnosis himself, but he knew of Libalt's practicing hypnosis on the outskirts of town. He knew Libalt as an innovative physician and heard that one of his patients had failed to help with sciatica pain. Libalt was able to relieve that patient of pain in one visit. Unlike Libalt, Bernheim was able to write several highly influential books translated into English. His book suggested therapeutics jump-started the use of hypnotism and brought more respectability to the study and application of hypnosis to the U.S. He influence of generation of physicians and psychologists, including young Sigmund Freud, who visited Nancy in 1889, the first year the International Conference of Hypnotism took place in Paris. Bernheim was a key speaker at the conference where Jean-Pierre Charcot was not present, a clear victory for the Nancy School's position on hypnotism because they didn't believe in Charcot's belief of, he was known for in every way. I don't know, I can't remember it right now. Anyway, Charcot considered hypnosis a sign of pathology, a defective mental condition, neurological condition, not psychological. Therefore, he had no use for the notion the Nancy School had that suggestion being promoted. Charcot's primary contribution to hypnosis were the credibility he gave to it through his research and his students Freud and Pierre Janet. Pierre Janet lived 88 years and contributed the most to hypnotism being used as a viable therapy for both the mind and the body. He studied stage hypnotists of his day. He realized that the audience was the subject because it was the audience who was there to be entertained, making the subject more than a prop. This infuriated Janet, who wanted to do more to protect hypnosis as a serious subject, i.e. in healing. He studied medicine under Charcot, who died shortly later after helping Janet set up his laboratory. Janet remained focused on hypnotism and its application in treating mental disorder and its use in understanding the subconscious, a term he coined in 1925. So understand, people, this all predates modern day psychoanalysis, psychotherapy, and the crap that doesn't work. Just want to make that point. He believed in two levels of mind, over and under being the subconscious mind, explaining that the subconscious mind is the cause of people engaging in illogical and unhealthy thoughts and behaviors. Freud used these terms in his own work, but never credited Janet with them. Janet was one of the most respected psychologists, given his decades of work consistently demonstrating how useful and legitimate hypnosis is to gain an understanding of motives and behaviors not accessible to the normal state of consciousness, which is why psychotherapy sucks, because they're not going in the subconscious mind. They don't know how to go in the subconscious mind. They're using the prefrontal cortex, which is the conscious mind, which is where we have all our, shall we say, reasons, rationalizations, and excuses as to why we can't do the things that we need to do. And this is a real problem when you're dealing with depressives, which is why antidepressants, although they're only about 70%, shall we say, effective, based on the work of Irving Kirsch from Harvard University and Walter Brown out of Brown University, who was able to replicate his work on placebos. They used SSRI, serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and found that they were only 30% successful, which means they're 70% not successful, failures. There you go, people. They were created as a marketing play by Big Pharma. That's all it is. There's no such thing as brain chemistry problems. It's all a bunch of bullshit, so get over that one. Now, getting back to our very important people who actually knew what the hell they were doing, our hypnotist. Let's see. This is like really interesting. Freud used these terms in his own work, never credited Janet with them, as I said. However, Freud rejected hypnosis was a major setback. He rejected it because he could never figure out how in the hell to hypnotize people. He completed his medical education in 1881, but had no idea what area of medicine he wanted to practice. He met Joseph Burr, who became a mentor and collaborator with Freud. He introduced Freud to hypnotism, explaining its many advantages. After 3 years internship in surgery and psychiatry at the University of Vienna, Freud pursued his interest in hypnosis with Charcot, which led him to speak positively about hypnotism. He opened his own practice, modeling the work of Charcot with hysterics, meaning people with mental illness. Usually women, at that time, it's always the women who are hysterical, right? Going beyond Charcot with being able to identify the patient's fixed ideas and purging them with hypnosis. However, Freud had difficulty putting his patients into trance. So he went to study at the Nancy School with Bernheim and Liebald and found they had a simpler process for hypnotizing patients, along with Janet's books. Janet's work probably left Freud struggling with scientific neurology and his desire to find a universal pathology, why people have problems, medical, mental, on the one hand, and his evolving beliefs about a more psychological explanation on the other hand. Freud was invested in finding a non-hypnotic way to treat patients for which he could be the originator. He also believed he was a lousy hypnotist, unable to get the majority of his patients into deep hypnotic state. Finally, hypnosis seemed to have sexual overtones that made him feel uncomfortable. Only Freud would have sexual overtones from hypnosis. Seriously. So what happened was he decided to not use hypnosis and he created psychoanalysis, which is how he got into this mess of weekly appointments, reinvigorating our problems every week, which is why people do not heal when they use these processes. They're just making it worse.
Mm.
Now, NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, came around the 1970s, the early 1970s with Bandler and Grinder, who studied Dr. Milton Erickson, who was a psychiatrist as well as a hypnotist, and he did a lot of training hypnosis, actually. And they realized how he used hypnosis. He would bring things to be so ambiguous that he would just blow out the problems of his patients. And then they also studied Virginia Satir, who was a family therapist, and she did the opposite. She would bring things to such tiny little pieces that they would blow out the problem that way. And also, Gestalt therapy was also something that they studied as well. And Gestalt actually is what led to Todd James and Wyatt Woodsmall creating something called timeline therapy in the 1980s. I use timeline therapy all the time. It's beautiful. It takes minutes to
Wow.
get rid of all the negative emotions. We go through anger, because that's the first one people feel, sadness, fear, guilt, and I add shame for my addicts, sex addicts. I don't work with drug addicts anymore. I can't stand dealing with them. And my eating disorder people is a form of addiction as well. And also limiting beliefs. So, these shrinks, they can't get rid of anger. They can't get rid of sadness. They can't do anything for these people. They can't help them get rid of the limiting beliefs. Why? Because they don't know how to do hypnosis. Now, what we need to understand is that neurolinguistic programming, because you're bypassing the critical faculty of the conscious mind, i.e. the prefrontal cortex, where we're reasoning, rationalizing, and explaining things away, reasoning, making excuses for everything, it's a form of hypnosis, even though people are in a very awake state. And actually, this is kind of the state that one is in when you're watching TV or in your religion stuff. Basically people are talking to you and you're getting hypnotized. But we have NLP language patterns that work really well. And the language patterns help us to get into the subconscious mind to be able to really understand what is running the person, because the subconscious mind, unconscious, same thing, is what actually runs people to do their dysfunctional thoughts and behaviors. And what
Yes.
we can do is
This
we can
subconscious.
take those internal representations, which are dysfunctional, and help them to learn their learnings, positive learnings, which is what timeline therapy is all about, and help them reframe things, do their forgiveness work, do their inner child work. I do all this with my hypnosis clients. And guess what? They can meet their objectives of the work, which isn't letting go of their problem. That's only 20%. It's 80% is what is the life you want to live? What kind of relationships do you want to have? What kind of partner do you have? Do you even want to have a partner? God knows I've had enough of partners. I'm not doing more partners. I'm alone. Thank you. I'm very happy that way. I have a lot of loving people here in Albania who more than take care of me. It's enough. And then basically, what kind of work do you want to do? Income producing activity. You want to do
Mm.
something that is meaningful to you, right? And how do you figure out how to
Right,
do
right.
make that a reality? So we do that through future pacing to help them figure all this stuff out. It's really beautiful, actually.
So are you
So
going to be doing that in the language learning lab?
yeah, the Language Learning Lab actually on November 11th is all about teaching 7 NLP language patterns, really to CEOs and C-suite executives. I'm really looking for people who have many, many employees. They have a board of directors that they have to answer to. More often than not, the board of directors are a pain in their butt because they have to meet their numbers in terms of the income requirements to make the stockholders money, or they can get fired from their jobs. And the average CEO only has a job for like 5 years and they're off to the next CEO job, actually,
Mm.
interestingly enough. So they're going to learn 7 language patterns to help them with the rapport, to help them with future pacing, which is helping people put things in the future, to really help the employees be much more engaged in what they're doing in their work, become more productive, and in so doing, increase the revenue, which is what CEOs have to do for the businesses that they are employed to work with for millions and millions of dollars is a reason.
Right.
They have a
So
lot of
that's
responsibility.
Tuesday, right? Tuesday, November 11th, you said?
Yes,
9:30 to 11:30 a.m. Eastern. So how do people get in contact with you?
we're going to have the what do you call it? The URL actually to where you can go to sign up for the course in the description of this video. That will make it much easier for people. So go look there, click on there, and you'll get all the information of all the really cool stuff we're going to be doing there. It's all written down there, along with the price, and you can pay for it there. And it's not cheaply priced. It's for CEOs and C-suite people who have really good finances, because this is the difference of keeping a job or losing a job for them. A job
Right.
worth millions, including stock options and all the rest of the stuff that they get. I know because I've worked with several CEOs over the years. I have one CEO who owns 3 homes, 3 real homes. That's many fancy things in each of her homes as one would have in their fancy home. One of them being, I know it's like 4,000 square foot Victorian home right outside of Andover, Mass. I mean, you can walk, well, actually, it's in Andover. You can walk to the center in 2 minutes from her house. It's rather amazing.
Wow.
There's
Wow.
in-ground pool back there. It's very, very beautiful. All the mosaic work in that place. Oh my God, it's an amazing place. But she has 2 other houses, one in New Hampshire for skiing and another one in Maine for swimming in the
That's
ocean.
so cool. So, do you have any parting words for the viewers?
If you can dream it, you can make it happen.
I love that. All right. Well, mahalo nui loa, Suzanne Kellner-Zinck. I'll put the information down below in the description box. Please click the subscribe, notification, and thumbs up. If you'd also like to donate to the channel, we appreciate it. It helps us build our content. My name is Christina Estrada, partner of Booyah Marketing, a hui ho. Until we meet again.